Hi piano players, Leah here from Lekela Music, and today I wanted to talk about chord progressions in general and why you need to know about them, how they can be useful to you even if you play mostly classical, and I just want to show you the basics. So let's get started. So one thing I've noticed when I look at YouTube channels devoted to learning piano is that they tend to fall into one of two camps. So you've got the chord-based approach that focus more on learning things by ear and demonstrating chord patterns you can learn off by heart, and sometimes improvisations using various chord progressions. And then the other approach is the more classical side of things, and it's based more on written music and learning to play well-known piano repertoire, understanding music theory and all the stuff that goes with that, the technique and what have you. And there tends to be a bit of a divide between these two camps, and I don't think that really needs to be there. And I've had conversations in the past with people who took piano lessons for years and never learned to understand and play chords so that they could, have a sing-song with their friends at a party or just figure out a favourite song. And I've also talked to people who didn't have the opportunity to take lessons, or maybe they were put off early on by overly strict teachers, and they ended up teaching themselves how to play popular songs, but they'd love to be able to play classical music or just read sheet music in general. And for some reason I haven't met many who've managed to do both. And I think it might be because until recently teachers taught in a very traditional way, and having knowledge of chords and being able to vamp your way through a sing-song was kind of frowned upon, to be honest. And in fact older teaching method books don't put a lot or usually any emphasis on teaching the kind of music theory that helps the student to form a coherent picture of how music works, and chords and chord progressions are actually very much part of that picture. Newer methods are starting to address that more, but I think there's some way to go yet. So why is it important to have an understanding of chords? Well, basically because music is full of them. I mean, what would a Chopin nocturne be without chords, or a Beethoven sonata? Even a Bach fugue is full of broken chords. And of course modern piano music is hugely chord based. Think of Einaudi or Yuruma, very much built off chords as the foundations for the melodies. And none of these are just random chords that happen to sound good in a particular song by chance. They tend to follow the laws of music theory, and they tend to follow certain chordal patterns. Now, I've already done a video outlining the concepts of tonic and dominant in the context of understanding the structure of any piece of music, and I'll link to that again at the end of this video, and I'd strongly recommend that you watch that to get the basics, but I'll go over it here in the context of chords as well, because if you have a good grasp of how certain chords relate to each other in any key, then that's going to help you learn your repertoire pieces for sure. But you'll also be able to figure out any pop or rock songs basically on the fly, because chords work the same way whether you're looking at a Scarlatti sonata or a Rihanna song. And I want you to understand the theory behind it so that you can take the knowledge and apply it in different contexts and in different keys. So let's go to the piano, and I'll show you some of the basics to get started with. But do stick around afterwards as well, because I want to show you a really handy little trick to see quickly what the important chords are in any key and how to transpose from one key to another easily. And we're going to be using the circle of fifths to do that. So I'm sure you've come across the concept of the four chords. If you haven't, I highly recommend that you check out the Axis of Awesome 4-chord video. If you don't like swearing, look for the clean version, because the original has some colourful words in it. But it's well worth a watch, because it really is such a great example of how one basic chord progression can form the basis of such a huge variety of music. But we're going to break it down. So in any key, the notes of that scale have different degrees of importance. The tonic key, the home note, is of course the most important, and the second most important is the fifth degree of the scale, known as the dominant. So in the key of C, the tonic is C and the dominant is G. So when you listen to a piece of music, it's very common for the first few bars, the first few measures, to be made up of those two chords in some way, because they help the ear to get a sense of the key, which is what we expect when we listen to music. If you want to get a sense of what it sounds like not to be in any key, I'd recommend listening to Schoenberg's 6 Little Pieces, which are atonal, and they're little gems in themselves, but a very different experience to what we're used to hearing, because they don't follow the rules of harmony and key. Another reason the tonic and dominant chords are so important is because between them they contain most of the notes in the key. So they can be used to harmonise almost everything. So for example, in the key of C, our chord of C major has these 3 notes, and the chord of G has G, B and D. If we bring that D down here and cover that C, you can see that those 2 chords cover everything except F and A. They're the only ones that aren't covered. And those notes can be harmonised by our third most important chord, which is the subdominant. Subdominant because it's a fifth below the tonic, whereas the dominant is a fifth above the tonic. Okay, so our subdominant chord in the key of C is F, so that contains the F and A. So between those 3 chords, we cover all the notes in the key. So those 3 chords alone can be used to harmonize pretty much any simple tune. You know, a lot of country music, folk songs, children's songs, they're all 3-chord songs. But we want to add a little more interest, and we're going to add a 4th chord. And that chord is a minor one, so that nicely balances out our first 3 chords, which are all major. In the key of C, that chord is going to be A minor, which is built on the 6th degree of the scale. And that's technically called the submediant, because it's well, the 3rd degree of the scale would be called the mediant, because it's midway between the tonic and dominant, and then the submediant is midway between the tonic and subdominant. So there's our submediant. Little extra information there for you. So our famous 4 chords that appear in so many songs are the chords built on the 1st degree of the scale, the 5th, the 6th, and the 4th. And we usually play these 3 below our tonic. So we're going to play them in this order. So that's going to sound like this. So that might already sound familiar. So you can absolutely just play all 4 chords in root position. That is, so root position means having the naming note at the bottom of the chord. Okay, G, A minor, F, all in root position. But if we play them that way, we end up bouncing all over the keyboard, which isn't ideal. So we're going to rearrange them a little so that they fit more efficiently under the hand. And this is where you're going to want to pay attention, because when you learn these shapes, you can move the shape around into different keys if you need to. So it'll make it easier for you to change the key as you need to. One of the most common reasons you might want to learn to play chords in the first place is so that you can provide the accompaniment either for yourself or for someone else singing. But unless you or they can sing everything in the key of C, then you have a bit of a problem if you can't transpose the chord progression into a different key. If you have ambitions to be the keyboard player in a band, it's really useful to be able to do this. Although, to be honest, I think most keyboard players just use the old transpose button on digital keyboards to do the work for them, so they don't necessarily know all the keys either. But they usually know the main ones. And certainly if you're playing an acoustic piano like this, you have to know all the chords, all the keys, because there's no transpose button. So let me show you the basic shape that you can move through this very common chord progression in a few different keys. So out of our four chords, we're going to invert 3 of them. So only the first chord stays in root position. And by inversion, I mean we're just rearranging the notes. So the first 2 chords are C and G. The tonic and dominant, and they share the note G, so they both have the note G. So we want to keep that in the same position, so we don't have to move our hand anywhere. We can just swap the C and E for B and D. Okay, so that's moving from the chord of C major to G major. So from here we want to move that whole shape. We're in that inverted G shape, and we're just going to move that whole shape up 1. So now we're playing C, E and A, which is your A minor chord in first inversion. So if we put that A back down there, you can see that's our A minor chord. So we're just putting the A at the top. And then all we need to do to move from A minor to F major is to swap the middle note E for an F, which gives you C, F and A. That's your F major chord in second inversion. So then our chord progression looks like this. So let's say you need to transpose this to the key of G. You can't sing it in C, and maybe it's too low for you, so you want to move it to G. Or maybe it's too high for you and you're moving it down to G, up or down. Again, your first chord is the tonic chord in root position. You do need to know your key signatures, but basically G has just 1 black note, F sharp, so we just need to take that into account. So remember, the top note of the tonic chord is the root note of the dominant chord. So tonic in the key of G, dominant. Okay, so our top note of the key of the first chord is the also contained in the next chord that we need. So we're just going to make the same shape. So we're keeping the top note and we're just moving the 2 notes down, but of course our F is sharp. Okay, and then we're taking this shape and we're just moving that up 1, and then we're just swapping out the middle note. Okay, so tonic, dominant, our submediant, and our subdominant. Let's try it in the key of D, which has F sharp and C sharp in the key signature. So we're going 1, 5, 6, 4. And in the key of A, which has F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. So 1, 5, 6, 4. So it's the basic same shape in every key, just keeping the key signature in mind. So I would spend plenty of time drilling these shapes. They do need to be very automatic. And you can add interest in the left hand by just playing the octave, naming the chord. So C, G, A, F. And you don't need any fancy rhythm patterns just yet. A simple repeating quarter note pattern is enough to start with. It's nice with pedal, so if you play it like this. It's probably already reminding you of a dozen different songs that use that chord progression. So what if the song you want to play doesn't use this chord pattern, or it has other chords thrown in? Well, that's certainly going to be the case, because even songs that use the 1, 5, 6, 4 chord progression are going to have different chords in the chorus or in the bridge or whatever, but the principle is the same. So you want to move as efficiently as possible and notice when 2 consecutive chords have 1 or more notes in common or have notes next door. It takes a little time at first to work your way through the possibilities, but it's a really valuable practice, so don't discount it. And don't think that just because you don't immediately come up with, the optimal chord arrangements, or you're struggling with it all, that you failed in any way. This is absolutely part of the process, and this is just where you are in that process. You can't go around it, you have to go through it. If you need to transpose, work out the chord progression in numerical terms, the 1 chord, the 5 chord, the 2 chord, whatever it is, and then work it out in the new key. But actually I've got a great shortcut to show you that's going to make that process really, really easy. So we're going to look at that now. Okay, so here's our circle of fifths. And what I want to use it for today is to discover what chords go together. So let's start with our key of C. So here we have C up here at the top. And let's just pick a color here. Let's go with red, nice and bright. So if we're looking at C, we're interested in the chord to the right of it, in other words, a fifth above C, and the chord that's a fifth below C, because those are the 3 most important major chords in the key of C. So C is our tonic chord, so we give it the Roman numeral I, because that's how we discuss chords in music, we give them Roman numerals. G is the 5th degree of the scale, so we give that a V for 5, and that's our dominant. So these are the 2 most important chords in the key of, in any key, the tonic and the dominant, 1 and 5, because they harmonize almost everything, or can be used to harmonize almost everything if you want to limit your chords. Now if we go a fifth in the other direction, so F is a fifth below C, so it makes it the subdominant, so sub being below, so a fifth below C is our subdominant, and that's the 3rd most important chord in a key. So those 3 chords between them harmonize pretty much everything in any melody. Not very interesting if you don't want to use any other color, but it basically does the trick. And a lot of music and a lot of folk songs and traditional songs would just use those 3 chords. Now to add a bit more color, if we come in here to the center, we have 3 more chords. These are the relative minors, so A minor being the relative minor of C, E minor being the relative minor of G, and D minor being the relative minor of F. So the circle of fifths is actually useful for figuring out relative minors as well if you have a diagram like this one. I'm just going to draw a little wedge around these right into the center there and out, so we can highlight our important chords that belong to the key of C. So A minor right there in the middle, that's going to be our most important minor chord. That's our 6. And those 4 chords, when you talk about 4 chord songs, those are the 4 chords in question. But we also have the 2 and your 3 chord, which is also a minor chord, which can add a lot of colour, can be very nice as well, depending on what you're going for. If you're composing, of course, if you're not just analysing what's already in a song, you'll often find these as well. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that we've got a chord progression that goes 1, 5, 2, 4, 1. Okay, that's what you've got, and you're in the key of C. You're playing a song that has that chord progression, but you want to change the key because you can't sing in that key. For example, it's too low. For example, you might want to move it up to maybe over to G. So let me just erase all this. So now I'm going to move to the key of G. So now I'm going to draw my little wedge around the chords on either side of G. So now G becomes our tonic chord. Going clockwise, we've got our dominant. Going counterclockwise, we've got our subdominant. And in the middle, we have our 3 minor chords. And our 3 there. Okay, so now our chord progression becomes G, D, A minor, C, back to G. So you can see now how easy it is to transpose, if you have a chart like this handy, to just whip it out and figure out the position of the chords in your original key in terms of their second, thirds, tonic, dominant, whatever they are, and then just move it around. So you can see you can do that anywhere on the circle of fifths. So that's just a very, very useful thing to have. Okay, so I know that's a lot to take in, so as always I would suggest taking a little at a time and getting comfortable with it. I'd also suggest that you take some time now and then in your repertoire pieces to notice any chords and try to identify whether they're tonic or dominant or subdominant or whatever. If you look at them, you'll find them, they're there, and it'll help you to make sense of your music and it'll make it easier to learn. As always, I really want to hear your thoughts on this, so make good use of the comment section, please do. If you found the video helpful, please consider subscribing, and if you'd like to help me get the video out to more viewers, all you have to do is hit the like button. So I'll see you again soon, and in the meantime, happy practicing.